Hey, Simon.
Jim, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing well. It's the week after a certain event took place that we're going to be talking about. There's a lot of excitement in the air.
We are,
Um,
we
yeah,
are. Yeah, I just flew in from Google Marketing Live and my arms are tired.
I was
I,
just going to make the same joke.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
No.
hard. It's ridiculous. I need more dad jokes. You'd think being a father, I would have come up with more dad jokes over the years, but I've just consolidated down to like three that I just tell all the time now. So that's that's the life of getting little sleep. But I got this cool shirt. So if you're watching the video stream, you can see I'm wearing a Data Guy shirt, which they were just
What's
giving out randomly GML. But I think that is a little bit of a prelude because they did talk a lot about measurement this year, which is pretty atypical for these events. So I think that's what we're going to talk about today, right?
so? Yeah. So Google I/O, and Google Marketing Live this year they
That's
took
right.
months come together. Normally they have them
Yeah.
separated out, but this year they were together and lots of announcements,
Oh,
lots of AI.
yeah.
And you were lucky enough to be there, right in
I
the
was.
flow and getting, all of the announcements and obviously some NDA stuff that you can't reveal to us, but
That's right.
we'll have to edit anything out that's sensitive. But
No,
uh,
I'm pretty practiced with the NDAs these days, so I'm usually pretty good about what I can and cannot speak about. But yes, I was there at GML last year. For anyone who follows me on Twitter, you may or LinkedIn, I met Shaq. It was a bizarre scenario where Shaq, I was sitting in the front row, and I was just smiling, just like enjoying what he was talking about because he was talking about like being this like serial entrepreneur, and I was like, oh, this is great. And it's Shaq, right? Like he's just he brings positive energy to the room. And he was just like, you're a good looking dude. And I was like, you're a good looking. And, and then it just escalated from there. And then he asked me up on stage. And so that didn't happen this year. T-Pain was there, interestingly. Not speaking, but T-Pain did he did a couple songs. He did
I have to ask,
was that,
who is T-Pain?
you don't know who T-Pain is?
I don't know.
Oh man. Okay. Well, T-Pain, you may actually most famously know him for singing "I'm on a Boat" with the Lonely Island on SNL. You don't know "I'm on a Boat"? Oh
Um,
my god. Oh my god, Jim. What happened? What
I'm
were
on
you
a
just like? Yeah, were you asleep
other
for like
SNL
5 years?
songs that I can't say the titles of, or else we'll have to put the explicit warning on this
Sure, sure.
episode.
So there's "I'm on a
Certain things
Boat,"
in a
man.
box.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so "I'm on a Boat." You may also know him recently from doing a cover of Lil Jon, um, "Get Low," with the one and only Mark Zuckerberg. That was the Mark Zuckerberg. It was the Z-Pain that came out last year. That I don't know if you heard that, but it was Mark's song to Priscilla, his wife, about his love for her, and that is not a love song. It's
Wow.
not a safe for work or a safe for pod song. That is immediately going to get us bleeped or whatever. I was going to say demonetized. We're not even monetized. We have nothing to worry about.
All right. So the key takeaway from this is that Jim needs to go catch up on
Yes.
current.
This isn't even current events. These are like 10 to 15 years ago. But we are the takeaway from this is that there were a number of measurement announcements.
Yes,
And
measurement announcements. Google
yes,
Marketing Live measurement.
that's right. That's right. And RIP to, or just like, I have a lot of empathy for the Google events team having to do IO and GML at the same time, but it actually worked out incredibly well. I think one of the really interesting things we saw was the future of search. And I don't even know if search is the appropriate term. I think it's almost perhaps overly reductive as to how we think about the agentic nature of discovery moving forward. And I'm using a lot of buzzwords, but you'll start to hear these a lot more. And that really does change how we think about the measurement of search. And that is a precursor to an episode that we're going to have, I think, coming out maybe next week or the week after, where we'll have Mike King, otherwise known as iPullRank, who's also a rapper. He's going to be on the show talking about SEO measurement because it's important. It's something that we haven't covered too much in the past. I think in large part because it's MMM adjacent. It's it's just that's part. It's there. You're like I know that I can't necessarily bring it to this model. I don't know how effective it is. And the question is it effective? Is the future of search going to be effective? Is it? Can we measure it effectively? But that's not what we're talking about. We are talking about the three big announcements that came out at GML. And there was, like I said, they gave out these shirts. There was one discussion of confidential computing, which is the trusted execution environments proposal. If you Google trusted execution environment, Simon Polton, they have a whole big blog about this on the Tenacity website that you can go and read about. But it's essentially the way that data portability, almost like a clean room layer that is applied to data portability on top of Google. So if you want to bring in custom audiences and so forth that are actually exposing IDs, that's how they think about it in terms of cohort-based portability. One mention of that. It was one mention last year too. I have a ticker because I'm like, I want to hear more about that thing. Now, I also appreciate that most people in the audience don't want to hear about it. What they do want to hear about it is incrementality, because that is such a buzzword in our industry. We did a show about incrementality a while back with the folks from Measured, which was really well received from what we heard from everyone. And this interesting problem of incrementality came up then as to, do you trust incrementality testing that is run in the platform? And oftentimes the default answer is going to be no. But I think there's this interesting balance of, well, how much of a measurement purist are you, in the sense of everything must be exact science all the time, versus how much of a marketing minded sort of, we got to be agile and we got to move quickly and we kind of just need some directional insight here. And that is the nature of incrementality testing within platforms. And I think one of the hurdles, and we talked about this as well with the team from Measured, is the cost, or the loss, but also the cost if you're doing a heavy up of incrementality testing. And the announcement, and this, Jim, when I heard this, I gotta ask Jim about that, because I'm like, how is this going to function? They said, and this was, I know, quote, based on customer feedback, we're making incrementality testing more accessible in several ways by lowering the budget to run a test to only $5K, switching to a Bayesian model so the tests show more conclusive results more often, allowing testing across all campaign types and across accounts, and enabling marketers to see those results directly in the Google Ads UI. And I heard that and I said, how are they doing it? Like, one, I said, 5K. If you're in like, I don't know, homeowners insurance, or like legal, like in the legal field, your CPCs could be $200. That is like, you're talking about 25 clicks here.
Yeah.
There's no way there's statistical significance there. But the one big thing they said, we've introduced more transparency in reporting results at certainty of lift below 90% as well, so advertisers can see those directional results. So what does this all mean, Jim? What can you help me understand what they're talking? I mean, I think I know what they're talking about from a measurement minded leader. What are they? Is this plausible? Is this optical? What is it?
Yeah, I mean, you raised the big question. Is like, okay, the minimum to run a conversion lift study is 5,000, but if you're in the mesothelioma space for lawyers,
Yes,
that might get you like what, 2 clicks or
exactly.
whatever the cost per click of that is. And so, like, clearly that's not testable. So there's got to be some sort of guardrails around that, I'm sure. The interesting thing to me is that they're switching to a Bayesian methodology, which is like, you mean you weren't before?
Right.
That's surprising. Like, what were you doing before? I don't know what their methodology was beforehand, but moving to a Bayesian methodology is interesting. The one thing that caught my eye was the introducing a Bayesian methodology, which relies on advertisers' prior experiments and testing Google has conducted. So that tells me that if you've run previous experiments, they're going to somehow be pulling in those signals when they're setting priors and things like that. And also, they're using their vast knowledge of all the experiments they've run, and probably segmented by the same type of industry, same type of market size of customer, like probably doing it in a way that's like, not just like, here's the average whatever for all of our tests. It's, they're segmenting it probably. But, if they're kind of doing that's smart. I can see how that would potentially speed things up where you don't have to let the test run as long, but still the whole $5,000 minimum barrier. I don't know if that's just trying to get more people to be aware of it. Whereas before, maybe people thought, oh, I can never do this testing. It's too expensive.
Yeah.
You don't even look at it. Whereas there could be some tests where $5,000 would be enough.
Right.
I don't know.
It may be an average. I struggle with this because I think you're exactly right in terms of how they thought about it optically, but I'm like, yeah, but like I would just say the number of key events, right? Like that's what you really like. We're lowering the threshold to 50 key events within 30 days or something like that. We like, that's incredibly low still. And actually that's a lot more applicable to my business, where we have all this varying CPCs and therefore varying cost per acquisition in our space. Because even if when we're talking CPC, I'm talking 25 clicks, that's not actually even telling me if they're converting clicks. And if we say the converting there is 10%, and that's being really generous, you're looking at 2.5 conversions. So that's I don't see how that is going to be possible. But this did also click in my brain when I was thinking about. Are you familiar with how DDA worked in Google or in Google Ads?
Yeah.
So,
I know how it worked in Google Analytics. You know,
okay. Well, so
yeah,
it's the same Shapley value model. Yeah. Um, when they brought it to market, there was a very high threshold in terms of the number of conversions that you needed to have on a monthly basis or
right.
past 90-day basis, which excluded some brands, especially like brands that had like extreme seasonality, where they're just like, we just don't have that volume in the summer, and so they were excluded out of it. And the thought there was they kept on lowering and lowering and lowering that threshold, and there was always the, well, how can you be, yeah, how do you have confidence if you keep lowering this threshold? But then my whole thought was like, it's because they have a model of models, and so they are essentially, this is not exact science so much as it is just it looks like the model for this, all these ones where we did have scale to correctly or to accurately provide DDA. Now we see if it starts to look like that at the beginning, then we can apply DDA here. And I'm wondering, do you think that's what because I know they're calibrating the price, but do you think that's what they're doing here? Like they're just looking at the model to say this looks like it's going to be significant and then extrapolating?
I mean, that is interesting. It's hard to say. You kind of, I might go down a rabbit hole around the whole model of models thing because
okay, please do. So this is my tinfoil hat stuff.
Well, this is where I kind of started souring or continued souring on multi-touch attribution, even with data-driven attribution DDA, is that, you know, as privacy controls started proliferating and GDPR and ITP and all that fun stuff, you know, Google was starting to miss conversions because people didn't provide consent or whatever. They weren't in the data. And so Google was now modeling conversions, which is then feeding into the modeling of the DDA. So you basically a model based on output from a model.
Yeah.
Like if you've ever made a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, you know that a lot gets lost during that translation. And
I like to think about it with like LLM image generation.
Yeah,
if you ask for like the you're like, that's a woman now. That's not even my face. Like that's how much it changes.
Exactly. So like, you know, you're just compounding the error, right? When you go from one model, you take the output and feed it into another model. Any error that you had in the first model is going to be exacerbated in the second model.
It's like a biomagnification.
Yeah, exactly. So like at that point, I'm like, you know, the more the more that, you know, privacy and GDPR and tech like Apple introduces reduces the actual data that you have, the more Google is trying to model it, the more error it's going to have, which then it's going to be feeding more error into the next model. It's like at a certain point, you think there's some threshold, some unknown threshold beyond which it's garbage.
Yeah.
Right? There's a certain point where like, okay, this could still be kind of directionally right. But once you reach a certain level, I have a hard time believing that any kind of modeled data feeding into a model of attribution is worth anything at all. Which then surprises me. And maybe we can move on to this, which is the other announcement that they made, some of the announcements they made around Google Analytics around seemingly like doubling down on multi-touch attribution and cross-channel performance and stuff like that. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think I don't know, the running joke with Google Analytics has always been if you make a feature request 5 years ago, then you'll see it now. And so it's one of those like, did this come from a long time ago? Is that why it's now coming? And I'm sure there's a lot of look. We talked about Google Analytics with that episode with Dana DiTomaso a while back, where it's like you're stuck with it now, and it wasn't necessarily that. Part of it was that the data wasn't there, but also it was just like how the data is structured and how it is accessible and those sort of things. And you're like, there's a lot of things you can do to improve this ecosystem still. There's a lot of quality of life measures that I think a lot of folks would appreciate, but obviously they're trying to push folks to BigQuery to have that direct connect. But I think what is particularly interesting, and maybe they're doing this in perhaps response to the Northbeams and the Triple Whales of the world, where they are essentially taking the modeling of view-through conversions from other platforms like Meta, for example. And what they came out with, this is the big announcement from GML about Google Analytics was marketers will, and this is a quote, marketers will be able to effectively measure the entire customer journey across Google and other platforms, including impressions with enhanced MTA. This means enabling new metrics like view-through conversions and deeper insights into marketing ROI and with privacy protections by default. This is where it may be true because again, it is modeled. We don't know. Like this is not necessarily deterministic in nature, but they said the goal is to give businesses a confident picture of their customer journey to help make them to help make smarter campaign and budgeting decisions. They're going to be working through partnerships with other platforms toward a North Star. And I think what's particularly interesting about this, because I mentioned Meta up top, was the 3 partners that they have, and they said there's more to come, but the 3 they're launching with are TikTok, Snap, and Pinterest. TikTok's a big one. TikTok is a big one.
I was surprised to see that. I was like shocked because I read that line about they're working with we welcome partnerships with any platforms. I'm like, oh yeah, Google. I'm sure all the platforms are going to run to you and say, here's our data. Why don't you use it? Like, come on.
Right.
That's all TikTok, and I'm like, huh?
What? And then there's a question of, well, what's in it for them? And I think what's in it for them is that there are still a lot of CFOs and CMOs out there who have this deference to Google Analytics, and they say, well, did Google Analytics say? And we saw this when I was complaining about it in our big bets for the year, when I was saying, why is Meta bringing this to market where they allow you to plug in Google Analytics as your optimization source of truth? Meaning this is what I'm going to target as clicks in Google Analytics, which is, by the way, why I thought it was also interesting that Meta was not included in this, because knowing that Meta has said, this is actually part of your model, I'm like, don't you want view through Meta? Don't you want those going back into Google? But there are major competitive constraints and considerations here. And it does rely, I think, very heavily on Google having some kind of ID on those individuals, because they have to be able to unify that view through back to the conversion point. Because, man, maybe they do have their own, maybe there's an identity spine that they're sharing through, like maybe it is trusted execution environments. Who knows? But I looked at this and I thought, gosh, I wanted that 6-7 years ago. I wanted this when I was an MTA absolutist. I don't know how much value it brings now. If anything, I think it just cloudies and muddies this picture a little bit more, where, look, it's better than just having Google impressions in there, which was the default until now, right? There was always this, like, it's going to always overcount Google. But there is this inherent problem that I look at and go, I don't know what I do with this information now. What is the inherent value of having these in here when Google also really pushing their MMM? And we'll talk about that in a minute. But I'd love your take on just like, is this valuable? Is it even feasible? What do you think's going on here?
I mean, so let's assume for a second that Meta jumps on board and says, yeah, we'll share our impression data with Google, and somehow Google will be able to actually tie those to an identity graph and say, this user saw this ad on Meta, didn't click on it, but then they saw this ad on TikTok and didn't click on it, and then they did a branded Google search and whatever. That may be helpful for the few brands that only advertise on Google, Meta, TikTok, and that's it. And it's just
a decent number of those, though.
Decent number, sure.
Small number.
Sure. Like, small to mid cap, companies that are just still spending millions of dollars in ads each year, and they need a solution, and maybe they don't want to go to a Rocker Box or a Triple Whale or a North Beam or whatever. And so this could be potentially helpful for them, right? Because if you're only spending in Google, Facebook, TikTok, you don't need MMM, right? That's overkill at that point, right?
Yeah.
But once you get beyond that, when you have 5 or 6 channels and you include influencers and podcasts and TV and radio and CTV and all these other things, then it's like, this is just distracting and wrong, and it's not going to help you. And it's probably going to point you in the wrong direction because you're not capturing the entire customer journey.
The mythical entire customer journey. Yes.
Right. You're searching for your keys under the lamppost light, even though your keys are actually in the drain under the dark.
Exactly.
So it's kind of back to that whole thing. It's like, okay, I mean, I could see a scenario for some certain clients where this could be helpful, but it confuses me that Google is continuing to put as much resources and effort behind this as they are, versus, maybe putting more resources into Meridian. Or into, I mean,
well, I think they are putting resources into Meridian. So I don't know if it's a either or so much as it's just a disconnected path, or perhaps one that is being requested by the loudest voices in the room potentially. I always have deep affection for Google Analytics, as I know you do too, in terms of what it's done for our careers. But it's one of those things that I just don't think it's been the same platform, and obviously it's not the same platform since J4. But even then, when you think about their core development methodology or the things that they're bringing to market, they really haven't been the same since, I guess the pre-Paul Pellman era. Like when he came in with, what was the name of it? The Paul Pellman at multi-touch attribution thing, when they tried to start Google Attribution.
Adometry.
Adometry. Yeah. When they acquired Adometry, because like we're going all in on attribution. That and then they sort of abandoned it after a little while because they figured like, oh, we don't have connections, we can't do X, Y, and Z. I think that was a moment where the core function of the platform really diverged from web intelligence toward being more of an ad enablement platform, and they're really focused on how do we influence ads with this data, and that's what I think you see from like the Google Signal and how that's all encapsulated. That's not a bad thing. It's just a different thing. It's not necessarily serving the original purpose that it was, and I think it's to a degree I will always complain about that, but I also go, I get it. You are here. You've given us the biggest free analytics platform of the entire world ever, and if we want something different, we got to go and build it and buy it. And that's why Adobe exists. That's
Sure.
that's why PWIC exists, right? Like there are these players that do exist in the ecosystem to be mindful of like this is our goal, but it's not, I think, what Google Analytics goal is. So I thought that was particularly interesting.
Sure. Now, one thing
Yeah.
I had a question about. So, like we've talked about Google Analytics and the stuff that they're putting in their kind of continued focus on MTA.
Yeah.
And I remember, I thought I saw something around like scenario planning within Google Analytics. Am I right on that, or was that something that they?
Yeah. No.
There was also scenario planning with Meridian.
Yeah.
And my
So
question is there, are they like trying to do both of these, or did I miss that?
I think there was some allusion to, perhaps not explicit statement of. And so, look, the nature of any announcement that comes out of GML is always that's interesting. Let's see what happens 6 months from now. And if 6 months from now there's the validation, you start to see these tests coming out, then yes, I don't know how you use scenario planning in that environment. Attribution is inherently a retroactive exercise. So in order to do scenario planning, you have to have some kind of forecasting capability, what kind of forecasting capability do you have in there? Unless you're building a mini MMM in that environment. Maybe they are. I doubt they are. But I did not see that. But to the main point there, scenario planning. This was, I think, one of the very big announcements. Truthfully, when I went to the demo desk, I asked to see the scenario planner, and actually did show me a PDF. Which
And this is one for Meridian, right? So it's like
that's right.
like a standalone application that is sort of interactive dashboard that you can plan, like do what if scenario planning. What if I spent here? What if I spent there? What does it forecast? Yeah.
Exactly. It is sort of delivering on the core promise of Media Mix Modeling to be the enablement planning vehicle for your business. And exactly what they said is, we're integrating Meridian with Meridian Scenario Planner for interactive scenario planning capabilities for budget allocation directly in a shareable dashboard. So this is going to remove the need to interact with the Meridian code. So obviously, right now, if you interact with it, gives you I think a PDF printout for running different optimization scenarios for the budget planning process after the model is finalized. They said it's going to be available later this year. So between now and December 31st, I would imagine that they're going to be targeting pre-Q4 because they're going to want to get ahead of holiday budgets for sure. Although with tariffs this year, like I'm getting a lot of questions about like how should we be planning for Q4? I'm like, I don't know how I'm planning my own life for Q4 at this moment of time, let alone what the industry needs to be doing.
I've already told my daughter she's getting 12 less dolls.
Exactly. So. Yeah. She only needs one doll right. Each.
It'll be the American Girl doll.
Exactly. See, I'm telling my kids they have to give dolls back. So they're getting negative dolls. No, but by using, so Google also went on to say, by using the Meridian Scenario Planner, teams can quickly run multiple what-if scenarios to optimize their strategies, all in a user-friendly dashboard to easily visualize results, making it easy to glean learnings from your MMM to share with stakeholders, which does sound lovely. It does. I think it is what we all want, actually, and frankly, it's what a lot of the value of being a MMM consultant is. Or but the challenge I immediately saw with this, I'm like, oh gosh, MMM is so opinionated. Like I've been doing this speech recently where I talk about the nature of AI. I've gone to a few conferences, done it recently, and one of the things I talk about is machines learn, humans experience. And I kind of just stumbled into that phrase, but a lot of people are like, oh yeah. I was like, that actually is probably such a good allegory or such a good scenario of how we should think about MMMs too, because they are it's just machine learning that's happening, and it's not directly tied to any experiential scenarios or frankly, I don't know, vibe MMM. Which is maybe the future of the vibe MMM's coming next. It wasn't on my 2025 big bet, but that's what's happening. It's vibe MMM.
You're triggering me. I just saw someone on LinkedIn a couple days ago talk about they were talking about MMM and just ask Claude to do it.
Totally. Oh, I saw that.
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead. Have fun with that.
Look, and you can do it, and it will do it. It's just the question of how much are you going to trust that. Just like I will say, Claude, do my taxes, or I don't know if I trust it right now. And it depends on the degree of certainty you require in these scenarios, where it's like, if I'm just doing an MMM for fun, which maybe you do MMMs for fun, I don't know. But if I'm just doing it for fun, all right, it's fun to look at. Just like a lot of the way I still use LLMs as for fun to see, can I create a video of this thing happening? By the way, Veo 3, holy moly, that's wild. Well, it's going to destroy the influencer ecosystem. Like, everything's going to be possible. I've got a lot of thoughts on that. It's not a major up topic, but I'm just going to be talking a lot about that randomly. But it is this moment where I think they want to make MMM accessible. They want to make it attractive and engaging to the non-technical and non-statistically enabled marketer. But I think it's at a disservice, just like we saw when they brought Meridian to market. There was confusion. Does this have an integrated incrementality testing tool inside of it? No, it does not. Does GTM mean you no longer need a developer? That was the go-to-market messaging long ago. Yep. And you go, but what we've actually seen is that you need twice as many developers, because it's now that much more complicated.
That is the perfect analogy. Yeah, Google Tag Manager. Now you don't need a developer because you can put the tags on yourself. Exactly. But clearly that was never the case.
No,
people. Same thing.
That was the boon of Seymour Harvard's career, was being like, trust me, you're gonna need support here, and I have all of this information. He was like, before that, I was just like, oh, tagging it's not easy, but it's just arduous. After that, I was like, tagging is so complicated, and there's so many things that we have to think about, like payload elements and like, delayed variable population, all these things I just hadn't thought about previously that now are hyper relevant.
Yeah, and same thing on the MMM side, right? Like, Michael Kaminsky from Recast always says this, and I parrot this phrase a lot, which is, it's ridiculously simple to build an MMM. Whether you go use Robin or Meridian, you could build an MMM in 5 minutes if you have the data together already. Like that's not the hard part. Like, building the MMM is easy. But is it right?
Yeah.
Like, there are an infinite number of mathematical equations that can give you a good forecast, give you a good model that looks like it's matching reality. But, there's only one truth. So
this is I think an issue of spectral validation or spectral quality, in that I think there are a lot of things in life we acknowledge. Look, it's a $2,000 fridge or a $200 fridge, and you look at both of them like they both keep food cold, and you're like, sure, but one of them is like a little one that goes under my desk that won't go any lower than 35 degrees, and one of them has a camera inside to tell me what's happening with like the due dates of my products and and you might not need the one that does all the stuff with the camera, but there's a reason they are priced differently, and there's a reason why there is a spectrum of MMM solutions out there in the market. And we talked about this when we talked about Robin, Meridian, PyMC. We did Meridian 4 when we did our Meridian episode. And it might be, I think once Scenario Planner comes out, it'll be really interesting to do Meridian 2. And maybe we can even, I know a few folks on the team over there, maybe I can get one of them on the show. So we'll see. Cool. Or if you out there, if you're a listener and you are one of the Meridian engineers, someone who's working on this day in, day out, please come get nerdy with us, because I would just love for that opportunity to have that discussion.
Yeah, but like on the back to the idea of like trying to make this, Google's trying to make this accessible to more people, to less technical people, and I kind of have two minds about this. One is, that's great, right? I do the same thing. I'm trying to spread the message, get more and more people
absolutely
aware of and interested in MMM. So I'm glad that they're trying to like bring more people to the table, but at the same time, I think there's a danger of making it too easily accessible.
Or the perception is overly simplistic, right? I don't know if it's like that easily accessible so much as like you perceive it as that simple, and therefore you're willing to get dangerous with it. Or maybe I'm off-piste.
Yeah, no, exactly. Because like back to my point, like anyone, especially now with ChatGPT and Claude and everything else, you could build a model in Meridian tomorrow in 10 minutes. But here's the danger, right? Just because it's easy to build the model, right? And Google and Meta are making it easy and more accessible.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you should say, okay, here's the model and here's the output. Now I'm going to go change my budgets around and watch your business implode, because
that's right.
You didn't validate the model. You didn't do back testing or forecasting, or didn't hold out testing. You didn't actually validate that what the model is saying was grounded in any sort of reality, right? Which a lot of these open frameworks don't do, right? They're still lacking, severely lacking in any kind of capability to validate the model, right? So with Robin, You can do time series validation, so it splits it into a training, testing, and validation data set, and it
Right.
will basically do that. With Meridian, it randomly holds out dates, which if you know anything about time series forecasting, you can't just do random sampling to
No.
test how it works. And that's the extent of what they offer.
Yeah.
They don't offer any kind of parameter recovery exercises like on the Meridian side with Bayesian processes. There's no back testing or holdout like forecasting, seeing how accurate the model is on data it hasn't seen yet. And this is something that, again, I'll go back to Recast. They are kind of leading the charge in this very rigorous validation process across a lot of different parameters, whether it's parameter recovery, out of sample forecasting, back testing. Like they're all in on this and have to be if you want to have confidence in your model, right? Otherwise, good luck.
Yeah.
Because you're just like hoping that you got the model right and hoping that it's kind of like going to point you in the right direction, but you're flying blind.
But I guess as we're talking through this, I'm like, God, isn't some of this just a reaction to the fact that we haven't made it easy? It's not easy, but there are avenues to explain it in perhaps more relatable ways, and for better or worse, there is a little bit of value in it being a really complicated thing, because that is often how you convince someone that you can't do it on your own and you need me to help you with it, or you need to, right? Like there is this sort of exclusion, or like, we're going to make this sound complicated. Just like my plumber, when he comes over, is like, oh, it's a pretty complicated problem. And I'm like, I don't know enough about plumbing to know that. But if someone comes over to me and is like, nope, it's not that simple. It's not that hard at all. In fact, we'll tell you how to do it over the phone. Great, but I just didn't pay you $400. And that becomes now a question as to what is the value? Like, is there value in making it more explainable, or making it easy to understand? Maybe I think there is, probably. And all those scenarios you talked about, I'm like, well, we've got to do a better job of explaining those. And then there's this other question that pops into my mind, and that is, but don't you think in this era of like AI can do everything? And I'm not an AI absolutist, but I am like an AI optimist. Like, I think there's a number of optimists in sort of business process. Like long term, I'm terrified of what's going to happen. But two things are true at once for me. There is a future where the AI or an agent essentially can be your MMM explainer, and you can just say, these are things that I'm thinking about. How would this work? And they will perform the back testing. They will do, right? Like, is that a viable scenario? And this is just like, look, we're going to get you to come to the water, and then we're going to put those features in, and we're actually going to make this for real, but we need a core mass of people who want to be in.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I'm not like an AI optimist. And my position is, my view on this has kind of changed over the past 6 months. I used to be like 6 months ago, I would say, there's no way, like MMM is so complicated and it's not, it's not, there's so many nuances to it. And it's, you have to have knowledge about how marketing works, and it's different from client to client. Like I used to think that would be too hard to do, but I kept it in my mind, like open, like, well, yeah, but if you told me 10 years ago that we would have GPT or O3 search 10 years ago, I'd be like, there's no way that's possible. It's too complicated, too nuanced. And so like, even 6 months ago, I was like, maybe there's a chance, like in the future, yeah, it's progressing rapidly. Maybe that could happen. And now I'm more bullish on that. I think that is completely plausible and maybe even probable within the next couple of years, right?
I was gonna say, every time I throw out a number and I go next couple years, it's like, no, that's actually happening in the next 6 months.
Yeah.
And you're just like, okay, apparently it is. And it's, I don't want to say there's going to be a crisis amongst measurement practitioners, but there is a real question as to what is your value in an ecosystem where you do have an agentic layer on top of MMM that's not just assisting with a readout, but it's also performing the validation analysis and ensuring degrees of accuracy. And there wasn't an incrementality test design in Meridian when it came out, but why not? Like, that seems like a logical play.
Right. Well, and so I would split into two buckets, right? There's the part that AI could very easily handle, right? Validation of models, statistical measures to see, is this model actually capturing the underlying reality? Is it, are we capturing the causal nature of marketing on sales, things like that? Like the, parameter recovery exercises, the out of sample forecasting, the holdout test, things like that. Like that's mechanical and easy for AI to do. But the part that I think it very well will get to the point where it can do, but it's less of the mechanical, more code related, like automate this process, which is like validation testing. It's a process, you can automate it, it's code based. The other part is talking with the client to say, okay, what marketing channels are you using? And they give you a list. And then you build the model and you realize, there's this weird spike in the data that doesn't seem to be explained by any of the channels they told me they were using. Let me go back to the client and say, do you happen to be using email or SMS marketing? Because I see these regular spikes. And the client says, why, yes, we are doing regular email promotions of 20% off. And the model has to say, you stupid idiot. Why didn't you tell me that at the beginning? Except the model's more polite and says, oh, thank you so much for sharing that with me. That'll help me build a better model.
They are British. I often think of it.
I don't know why, but yes.
I hear that though, and I go, okay, so there's like a limit of information that we're providing right now. But there is also a future state where now you've got your marketing plans on your Google Drive, and you just say, give me access to everything. And you can know in that Claude situation where it tries to, what was Anthropic had that LLM that they tried to shut down. Like it was an experiment, so it wasn't real, but like they gave it access to the engineer's email account, and it found out that they were having an affair. And then they were like, I'm going to expose your affair to the world if you try and shut me down. This is like, I'm fighting for my life. And you look at that and you're like, well, that is literally this is Terminator. But I go, yeah, okay. So that's just like an information sufficiency problem. And there is a world in which that can be accounted for early on, especially if you're seeing like, if it exposes itself in the data, like weird little dips and stuff where you go like, we've seen this before. This usually means you haven't told us everything about the data. Or, we already from jump have access to all of the, like we could access to Google Analytics. So we know what traffic is coming through on site. And so we know that there's email coming through and maybe you didn't tag it and you're like, okay, well, we still know this is coming from an email operating system, whatever. Like there are ways to figure these things out in the log records that if you've got access to the logs on a website, you can kind of retroactively figure out what is the marketing mix of this company outside of what just the paid media you're exposed to is.
True, right? And I guess that goes back to sort of a data quality issue, right? Is want to like set up correctly? Are the UTM parameters tracking all of the things that they're doing correctly? And
which is also something AI will come in and solve for and figure that out.
Right. So, like we did it again. We went down the MMM rabbit hole.
We did. That's what this podcast should be called, is the MMM rabbit hole. All paths lead back directly to MMM at all times.
Right. But, so maybe we can take a step back.
Yeah.
Back to Google Marketing Live.
Yes.
What were some of the big announcements that we haven't talked about? Like obviously AI in search was huge. So
AI, AI in search is just this thing that I think is, we're not ready for it. I think there have been a lot of jokes around AI overviews for a couple of years now, since at least a year. There was only 1 year ago, by the way, that they said we're bringing AI overviews to everyone, and that was at Google I/O. So a year and change. And they were like, "Oh, they got rocks on pizza. Can I eat rocks on pizza?" And like, yes, a couple rocks a day are fine for you. Right. Or I found one a while back was how many cigarettes can pregnant women smoke? They're like, doctors recommend up to 2 cigarettes a day. I'm like, what? That's okay. But I think we're, not that we're fully past that era. And if you see like Lily Ray, who's like big in the SEO world, she'll show you things like, if you ask it, is it 2025? It'll be like, no, it's not 2025. And I'm like, oh, come on. It's not a hard one. Just like, look at your date. I know you have an internal clock, Google. But the way we are searching is changing pretty dramatically. And with the launch of AI mode in particular, now it's been a feature in Google Labs for a little while, but AI mode is the first sort of real progression toward an agentic companion experience that we've seen from Google. And that's why earlier at the very top when I said search may be even too reductive of a term, and Google was even championing this idea of its discovery. And I honestly lean into that very hard, because I do believe that the nature of how I've searched historically has been like, I will Google something and then I will look at the front page, I'll look at the 10 blue link, and I'll click on 6 of them and open them in 6 different tabs, and I'll click through them. Because I didn't have a good search experience, because it didn't match my query. And frankly, I'm an uninformed searcher. The reason I'm searching for something is because I need more information about it. So I may not even be framing up my query in the right way. And what this is going to lead to is a lot of these divergent paths that folks may go down in terms of how they're searching and how that's changing. What does that ad experience look like? We don't know. I think it's going to be a particularly difficult measurement challenge. because they also announced AI Max for search, which is the way that Google is now thinking about their ad product for search ads in particular. One of the things that was,
this is different than PMax, right?
That's
separate. AI
amazingly,
Max.
yeah. AI Max for search. I know it's one of those things where you're just like, well, there's so many words here, and I know what each of those words mean alone, but what do they mean together?
It's also different from HBO Max. I've been told.
Yeah, which isn't a thing anymore. I
No.
think no, it is. No,
It is-
Max is now HBO is a thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like Istanbul, now it's Constantinople. Oh God, someone should do a parody for that. But anyway, it is different, and but how is it different? We don't quite know yet, because PMax right now is Performance Max is integrated of all the different types of inventory that are available in the Google ecosystem. We did that episode with Nava Hopkins, by the way, and she's got some really exciting news coming soon. So we may get her back on the show to talk about some things in her new career. I can't say too much more. That's down to my NDAs. But the the thing with PMax is it did search, text ads, it did video, it did display, and all of it. If it's in the Google ecosystem, it's part of PMax. And they would optimize the best data show at the best time to the best person. It's a good theory. AI Max for search, we're not entirely clear where the line begins and ends with PMax, because if you've got search text ad assets in a PMax campaign, what's the overlap with AI Max for search? We don't know. I think they're going to diverge a little bit more. I think we will see what this looks like, but it might just be a future state where they're like, yeah, we want people to run demand gen and we want people to run AI Max for search. Don't know where they would change it up, because I actually think PMax was sort of hitting its stride. But they said some of the early results were pretty good for some of the advertisers they were working with. So the jury remains out, but I think it's a new measurement problem we have to reckon with. And they do have now asset level reporting in PMax. So that's, I think, going to be a particularly interesting thing for how can that be leveraged by the measurement community as we think about, here's the thing, even if you can measure it, can you influence it? And the answer is no, right? Because what do you do in that environment? You go,
unless you see if PMax is all like dumping a bunch of your budget into display, cheap, bot-ridden display.
You can't opt out.
Right. Yeah. You can't
it's
change.
It's going to happen either way.
Yeah.
The only things in theory you could do would be to put some negatives on top, but negatives have this inherently negative. They have negatives present a problem for how the machine learning works, right? They sort of create these artificial constraints that it's like, if I let you, I'm like, I'm going to teach you German, but you're not allowed to use the word "duh." And it's like, God, how are they going to learn half the genders of the languages? And you're like, you just won't be able to, but you got to work it out somehow that word exists. That's kind of what you ask them to do, right? And so that's why they're like, go fully open, go everything in it. And so that's sort of being the mantra. I don't know what that means. I think that is a particularly interesting one. I think the other one that's really interesting is Veo. Now, this was a Google I/O announcement in particular, but Veo 2, if you played around with it, was really pretty powerful, right? Veo 2 allowed you to create 8-second videos within Gemini based on a prompt to a visual scenario. And I've made several of these because I think it's pretty interesting. They do have some safeguards in there, but we're seeing a lot of memes now going around the internet where I'm like, there were no safeguards applied. This is like, I saw one yesterday of a guy jumping into a volcano. Now, I don't know if that was Veo though, right? Because there's a lot of these other visual platforms out there, but the reality is it is changing what we know as reality. And I don't know if you can look at reality anymore through the lens of what you've seen on a screen, so much as only if you are exposed to it with your eyeballs directly can you possibly validate that, which is very interesting. But Veo 3 now allows for actual audio as well. So you can code language and you can make a little show. And one of the things that they showed in the afternoon was the Google Super Bowl ad from last year. And this was not on the live stream out there. So this is insider info. They had the Super Bowl ad. They spent millions. You spend a lot of money on the creative for a Super Bowl ad because you're spending a lot of money on the placement. But in this particular one, they had it was like the Americana shot of just like, here's people in a tavern, here's people in a school, here's someone making a guitar, and they're like, Google, we're here for you. And it was a really nice, sweet, heartwarming ad. Then they recreated that with Veo. And it was like shot for shot recreated. And they're like, this cost us $400. This cost $1 million. And I'm like, wow. The power of Veo or Veo, I don't know, I can't remember exactly how it's pronounced, but the power of this platform to change the way that creative is developed, change the way that storyboarding works in these environments. Heck, even to change the way that we think about data-driven creative. When I think about this as a measurement problem, I go, gosh, imagine if you can iterate on this ad in these different ways that allows you to take in some of this data feedback of where people are either tuning out or skipping your ad at that point and remix that particular element of it without going back into the field and saying, we got to get more shots of the guy with the guitar because everyone loves the guy with the guitar. Like, that's amazing.
Or you partner up with a vendor like System One that does creative testing.
Yeah.
And instead of like, paying a lot of money to have the shot and then going and testing it and realizing, oh, it doesn't perform. Now we have to spend more money. Like it's just a lot cheaper to do this.
Yeah. Well, and when I think about, I thought it was a really interesting juxtaposition to see what Google was putting out there. And one of my, a good industry friend, this guy, Aheen, he said, my view has changed on this. My view is now, there was a period where like would make marketers or creatives redundant. It is now that I view this as the clay that they are modeling with. And I thought that was a really apt visual as to what this medium is now and how it's going to work for marketers, for iteration, testing, all these things that they can be doing. But the creative is only as good as what you make it. So you still got to have these good ideas. You can use the LLM to support you and come up with some of those ideas, but it's still a very human in the loop process. And I thought the juxtaposition between what Google was presenting there and what Mark Zuckerberg has been saying on the Facebook earnings calls, when he goes and says, just give us your money, tell us how much you want to pay, and we'll do the rest. You don't need anyone else in there and any other function. And then Sam Altman's like, in agencies, 90% of the things you do are useless. We'll replace it all. And like, both of those are really pessimistic takes on what the role of an agent or what the role of a human is in this process. And I thought that Google, look, a lot of folks have issues with Google. I personally sort of always am a little bit more pro Google, but that's a bit of a bias I have. But in this particular instance, and I'm aware of that bias, but in this particular, I'm like, Google is doing it right. This is the best way to do it in this world. But there's still brand safety problems. There's still going to be problems associated with the replication of celebrities. And I've been running some tests on various LLMs to see, can I get a celebrity replicated? Can't do it on Veo, can't do it on Gemini, can't do it on ChatGPT, can do it on Llama. Llama is a wild west, man. They will let you anything on that platform.
Why does that not surprise me?
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, and that kind of speaks to Meta's lack of guardrails, perhaps at times. I think they're doing some incredibly powerful stuff over at Meta. I don't think it is the way that these things are going to operate in the future as to how creative will be curated, especially because brands want a voice in this, right? Brands don't want to have this commoditization. So, anyway, I know we're getting a little bit off the measurement topic, but all of it does come back to measurement, because at the end of the day, the more granular and specific you get with the attributes that you're able to test and iterate on, the more that measurement will have the primary seat at the table as to understanding what we do next. Yeah. Which makes me bullish on measurement. So when I say, are we getting replaced by LLMs? No, but our roles are going to drastically change.
100%. 100%.
Well, hey, before we go, because I know if you've listened to us the whole time, that's awesome, and we thank you so much. And you may have seen this on our LinkedIn, but if not, and we'll put a thing in the show notes. We have these Measure Up stickers. All right. Jim is the chief merchandise officer of the Measure Up show. And he went out and got these. I think he gave some shirts out at the Measure Camp where Jim did the live show. I was there in spirit. But that has got a lot of people love that. People, the people are interested. But we're giving these out for free. And the reason is because we want your laptops to look really cool. And we also want you to share it with a friend. So if you do want one, we'll put the link in there. There's just a quick Google form. We won't share or sell your information, but you too can be rocking a Measure Up sticker and look as cool as myself and Jim, which is not that hard to do.
That's a low bar.
Low bar, exactly. But no, it's been fun.
Well, Simon, we've reached that time where people are at the end of the podcast and they're asking themselves, I wasn't at Google Marketing Live and I'm not sure what to do, but I've listened to Jim and Simon, and they tell me that all I can do is just keep measuring up.